wanted to stop living in the U.S. when the whole Iraq War started, looking for a different way of contributing um, to the education of my children in a multicultural environment as well. So there was a lot of different factors in there, but a lot of it was political and multicultural. So we came to Costa Rica and started working. I got a job teaching at a Friends School, which is up in Monteverde,
Okay.
and so then now
The Friends with capital F.
Friends with a capital F.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the Quakers.
The Quakers, yeah.
And then you got connected with this school, and you became the teacher for peace education.
Right. The course is called Peace and Conflict Studies.
Okay. So give us a little bit of an example exactly. What does it mean? Peace is a very broad word, and everybody, the devil wants peace. And so what exactly is that that you're teaching here?
Well, the way it works is we for the peace course, we try and we break it down into 4 different areas.
Okay.
One is trying to understand what is this idea of peace and what is conflict, and we try and define where they come from, how do you generate peace, how do you transform conflict, and what's behind those concepts. And then we look at the manifestations of conflict in the world and peace in the world through looking at examples of prejudice and discrimination, and how those have been combated and transformed by, for example, Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. and examples like this. And we study from a psychological point of view, from a sociological point of view. And then we look at global issues of development and globalization and militarism, and look at how those are affecting the world. And then finally, how then do we respond to these things? How do we take those theories of what peace is, what conflict is, what people's needs and interests are around these, how we approach understanding each other, and then how can we use that to maybe move towards a more peaceful world.
And of course, it's probably a very complicated thing. You cannot explain that in 5 minutes to our viewers what exactly are the details of achieving that, putting in practice all those beautiful theories. But what is your answer to those people who say, well, Gandhi is dead, he was killed violently, and
Yes.
Luther King was killed violently.
Yes.
And what do you do when you have a Hitler coming up, and you can't just show the sign of peace to people like that?
Well, Gandhi did way more than showing a sign of peace, and so did Martin Luther King, and so have many others. Those were leaders of movements, and there have been other movements. But the idea is you don't just put up your peace sign and hope that people go away. It takes direct action, and it takes a lot of organized direct action and consciousness raising. This was a question I put to my students the other day. What do you do in the face of, say you had a nuclear armed Hitler today? What would nonviolence be, irrelevant in the face of something like this? And I would say no, in order to achieve a nonviolent, the peace is the way, right? That's what Gandhi said. But you have to do something about it. You have to, and sometimes that requires suffering, sometimes it requires sacrifice, but you have to always know that what you're doing is the peaceful way, so it's the right way. And I guess that comes from the idea that the individual peace that you must have first. Most people can't get to the level where they say, oh, nonviolence would work in these situations, because they haven't done the internal work to recognize that their individual peace is first. And when they realize that the power that can come from having individual peace, then when I relate to you or someone else, then I can transmit that and realize, oh, there's a force that's even more powerful than yelling and screaming or hitting or shooting, and that's you and I integrating ourselves and moving forward. And that's always going to be the response that will defeat violence. It just takes a long time, and it takes a lot of sacrifice.
So what happened in the 2 First World Wars? They missed what you're teaching now. They just didn't think about it. That they could have resolved the problem in a non-violent manner. and they had to go to war, and we're still doing it in
Yes.
Afghanistan and
Yeah.
Iraq.
Yes, because it's essentially it's still the same war, you know, the which is over resources, very much focused on who's controlling the Middle East and who's controlling the petroleum supplies and where it flows and where it goes, you know, and so we've been fighting the same war for 100 years, and so until we could get to the place where we recognize that we're all tied up in our needs and resources being together, and that if we collaborated and worked, you know, united on these things, then we could all rise and benefit from the wealth.
So you would say that the Second World War was not a justified war, but rather a mishandled war.
Yes, that it was a war that came about because of the fact that we were still in we use war to solve our problems mentality. We use war to decide who gets more resources. We use war to figure out who's got the power and control, instead of saying, well, we all need the power, we all need the control, and let's do it together.
We're still focusing on it with their budgets, and the United States one of the biggest budgets in
Right.
defense. We're from Canada, and Canada about $20 billion a year we're devoting to defense or
Yeah.
militarism. But we don't have a Department of Peace like Costa Rica with
Yeah.
a lot smaller budget.
Yes.
So I think it's a matter of priorities. Okay, so what do you think that will happen with all these students that you're training?
Well, the students, I hope that they will, you know, go back home to wherever they are. Students from Palestine, Israel, Brazil, places where there's, you know, Colombia, Argentina, places where there's long histories of violent conflict, and these students are in a position to become leaders at the community, at the national level. And if we could have just said, if we could have opened their minds to the idea that there's another way, that there's a way where you can look at how integrative power could be used instead of coercive power. If you can think about a way of let's look at how everyone can win in this situation when we resolve the conflict, instead of always looking for I win, you lose. If these students going back can take that kind of attitude towards leadership in working at the national level in Colombia, in Argentina, in Brazil, in Israel, in Palestine, then the changes could be radical.
Right.
Peace comes. The peace comes also from sharing. The one thing that we do a lot of. We also do a lot of theater and clowning for peace, and we're going next week to Nicaragua to do a theater and clowning workshop with orphans in northern Nicaragua. And when I take my students clowning or doing theater with people like this, the main thing I remind them is, you don't have to be funny, you don't have to be a clown, you don't have to be a super actor, you don't have to be and if you're doing peace work or you're doing activism to change things, but the main thing you need to do is come from a place of love. And if you can come from that place, then the people you're relating to will have no option but to feel that and respond to it in a way. And it's difficult to respond to love with hate.
That's right.
It's difficult.
If you have sympathy for someone, then you
That's
understand
right.
even a small
That's
flash.
right. Yeah.
You can smile.
Yes,
and
that's
see
right.
that the other person is a human. It's
That's
not
right.
perfect.
Right.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. So, well, I wish you well in your project here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
You